Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back. Today we're going to be sort of discussing Kickstarter, specifically in reference to the monster taming genre, which, if you're new to the channel, is the niche in which I chiefly cover. I think a big chunk of what I'm going to say will apply to other genres as well, but I want you to understand the focus of this video and why we won't be bringing up non-monster taming projects, or at least those that are in some way related to the genre itself. All that being said, in recent years, the monster taming genre has been experiencing quite the boom, with many developers jumping on the Kickstarter bandwagon in order to make their dreams of creating their very own monster taming game a reality. This has had some really good and really bad consequences, which ultimately has me far more apprehensive when it comes to these types of games, and in this video I'm going to explain why. We'll be taking a look at some of the games that have had Kickstarter campaigns within the last few years, and I'm going to discuss some of the trends I've noticed with many games, but we also won't be attacking anyone specifically because I feel like doing a full analysis of various games are better situated in my What Happened To series, which FYI the next one is in the works. This video is a little tough to make just because I was so hyped for a lot of these games, and in many cases I'm disappointed with various aspects. So yeah, let's dive in. Alright, so we're mostly going to be focusing on either games that have been fully released, cancelled, or on hiatus, and those that have had little news or gone silent. Games that have been showcasing steady progression that aren't finished yet. While I'd love to include those as a positive aspect to Kickstarter, it's hard to when these games aren't actually fully out, so anything can change. Anyways, a lot of monster taming Kickstarters have had tremendous success. One of our users in the Discord server, and I apologize but I couldn't find your comment, had mentioned something to the effect that it feels like a lot of non-monster taming Kickstarter games are actually releasing and providing adequate updates, whereas many of the actual Kickstarter games have gone completely silent. At first, when I heard this, I was like, wait, is that actually the case? It wasn't really something I had compartmentalized in my head because I just look at all these games as game. I don't really think to myself, oh, this one had a Kickstarter and this one didn't. So after looking through what the person had said, it definitely wasn't a concrete rule because there are many exceptions to this, but I have in fact noticed that a lot of Kickstarted games in the genre seem to get their funding and kind of just go quiet. Now, a brief period of no news after Kickstarter or little news is definitely normal because the actual campaign itself is huge, and a lot of devs save a bunch of their reveals and cool stuff to show off during this period in order to secure funding. That's totally fine, but I'm not referring to games like Gremlin's Tale that was funded, took a little tiny bit of a break, but is still providing adequate updates through monster reveals and just being very transparent with their community. I'm talking about games that have legitimately stopped providing any sort of meaningful content in general. Now, I don't want to single out any specific games, but I do have to use a few examples here, otherwise this video would be completely redundant and vague, and I'm not claiming that any of these people are scamming. I'm sure there's different reasons for what's going on, but nevertheless, people have put money into these games and do expect some semblance of communication between themselves and development studios. Let's look at The Last Monsters, for example. They have received about $1,300 in funding, which by no means is a large amount for a 3D monster taming game, and I wouldn't be surprised if that funding is completely gone. But the game was never completed and hasn't had a Kickstarter update since 2020. Now, I understand things can happen. COVID hit, people get sick, people quit, etc. But there should be at least a line of communication between developers and the audience unless everybody died. Let's say one of the developers got sick or died. You don't have to disclose medical information. I do think when people are investing money into your product, you have to at least give them an update. Look, we lost a developer and we're kind of on hiatus until further notice. We got nothing in that case. I think about myself, for example, and I have a lot of fans who feel that they have invested a lot of their time into this channel. So if something happened to me, whether it be financially or health-wise, I would make a post or even have someone else post for me just to inform people what's going on. Now, obviously, if I was hit by a car or something like that, it wouldn't be possible, but what I'm saying is I would do my best to have a line of communication if I just randomly couldn't make videos anymore. Now, all that being said, the vast majority of my audience didn't invest actual money into a product that I'm promising, so I'd say that this puts an even greater onus on those who have collected Kickstarter funds to be completely transparent with their audience. There are several examples of this happening, and again, I'm going to go into further detail when we actually cover these games individually. If you've backed a Kickstarter game and you're someone who's in the genre, which is who this video is for, I'm sure off the top of your head you can think of a few games that just have been quiet. Another thing I've noticed a lot in the Kickstarter scene is delays and sometimes very unrealistic goals, especially for the funding amount that's outlined in said goal. Many developers have very low goals, so they're able to secure funding, since getting less than that goal would net nothing, and once the goal is reached, at least they'll get something. This then sets in FOMO for a lot of people that are like, oh, the game's getting funded, I want to get in, I want to get some cool backer stuff, and then that actually exponentially increases donation. This, however, can cause issues for games that maybe just hit the small funding goal in hopes of having it exponentially increase, and once funded to only have it be passed by a marginal amount, which isn't enough to actually make the game or even secure a publisher. We haven't necessarily seen too many games barely get funded in the genre, but it's still something that I could see cause major issues down the line if this sort of philosophy is taken. There's oftentimes tons of promises too. All of these different features that ultimately seem crazy when you step back from the hype. Stuff like multiple game modes that would literally have the developers create a separate game entirely just to have it funded, or even in some very interesting cases, the promise of multiplayer at a capacity that not even the most profitable AAA studios can manage. You then have Kickstarter campaigns that use entirely video-edited footage for their trailers that don't include real gameplay, but instead a fake or quote-unquote proof of concept, but there have been many cases where this fact wasn't disclosed until after funding was met and backers had already paid. Most if not all of the Kickstarters that have been put out have had delays as well, and while delays are very common in the gaming scene, some of the timed goals for these games are just suspicious, or at least look way too confident right from the start. I get when there's delays for a full release of a game, there's a lot of ins and outs that are associated with actually publishing something on various platforms, but when we're talking about like a prototype that's planned for like a month after the Kickstarter campaign and it doesn't come till like 2 years later, you have a bit of an issue. All of this has caused me, someone who was really hyped about Kickstarter projects after seeing the success of a game like Temtem or Monster Sanctuary or Serialum, very cynical now. It's oftentimes noted that there is risk associated with donating to Kickstarter, however, that does not absolve anyone from any responsibility they have to their fans either. If you make a Kickstarter campaign and are successful, then proceed to use up all your funding. It's your job to secure more funding. You shouldn't be starting a Kickstarter campaign if acquiring more funding is not something you're able to do realistically, or if everything hinges on a very unstable avenue that could cause everything to crumble in an instant. To the point regarding non-Kickstarter games providing more updates, I don't necessarily think that's true. Many games that have not been Kickstarted do go on long update droughts, but at the end of the day, if they're not receiving funding from their audience, they don't really owe anybody constant updates just from a financial perspective. Now, none of this is to say Kickstarter is bad and you shouldn't invest in these games ever. Some of the best games in the genre were created thanks to Kickstarter and crowdsourced funding, and in many cases have over-delivered what they initially promised. A great example of an amazing title coming from Kickstarter is Monster Sanctuary, the monster taming Metroidvania that launched a free DLC post-launch that was completely unnecessary from an obligation standpoint. It wasn't promised in their campaign, they just did it. The team set realistic goals, continued to keep their audience in the loop, and then subsequently delivered an awesome product. This is true for many games, even those that have had delays, and it's important to give them the proper credit that they deserve. Anyways, all that being said, to sort of cut this rant short, as a community, we need to be more vigilant when looking at these Kickstarter campaigns. That especially goes for me and any developers that are thinking about going the Kickstarter route. Be honest, be transparent, and while I'm sure it's tempting to say your game's gonna come out in 2 months with a billion features, keep it realistic, because when you're not able to keep your promises, whether your intentions are good or not, it hurts your fans, the monster taming genre, and Kickstarter as a whole. We must also remember that Kickstarter is not the plague. Many great titles come from it, so while being skeptical is good, complete and utter cynicism is also bad as well. So at the end of the day, just like with many realities of life, this is a very nuanced situation that doesn't have a simple answer. Kickstarter has its ups and downs, and it's our job to try to find games that we believe will make it and are realistic, and avoid the ones that we don't believe are able to deliver. I genuinely don't think that any of the developers have ill intent when putting together their Kickstarter campaigns, even those that have been canceled or put on hiatus or otherwise. But as I stated in my video going over the Untamed Isles situation, the ramifications of a game not being made after receiving funding is the same whether or not intentions were good. So anyways, I do hope you guys did enjoy this video. I hope it gave a little bit of insight into the current Kickstarter situation and the genre in general. And if you do want to stay up to date on all things monster taming, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.